Welcome to the Merland. I'm Dominic Machado, and today I am joined by my cousin across the pond, Mark Machado, and everyone's favorite sports journalist in Sri Lanka, Estelle Vasudevan in Dambulla. And the reason why Estelle is in Dambulla is because this week we have the Women's Asia Cup, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So, just as a reminder, the games start tomorrow evening, Sri Lanka time. And Sri Lanka's first game is on Saturday against Bangladesh. Sri Lanka is grouped with Bangladesh. You know, you got to keep the rivalry going. Malaysia and Thailand. And the top two of that group will progress to the semifinals. And from there, the winner will play in the finals. Now, this is a warm up tournament for the forthcoming 2024 World Cup to be held in Bangladesh. And so we're going to bring you all the news and the updates, and we'll start with a vibe check. Estelle, you're in Dambulla covering the tournament live for us. What do the vibes feel like? How are people reacting? Are people excited?
I think there's a bit of excitement because Sri Lanka has been doing so well in the most recent past. In terms of the area, I mean, lots of hoardings have gone up. Entrance is free, remember? So
Mm-hmm.
we are expecting at least a bit of a crowd to turn up. The ground looks amazing, and the weather is really awesome. I mean, it's been a bit cloudy, but at the same time, not too warm as well. So I think the players will also enjoy it. A lot of the teams have not played in Dambulla in the past, so it'll be an exciting tournament, I think, and hopefully there'll be a few thousands of people coming in for the games.
Mark, how are you feeling about the upcoming tournament? It seems like again it's going to be hard to watch in the UK. So, how are you feeling about this very exciting tournament coming up, and how do you feel about the fact that again Sri Lanka cricket is being sidelined by the media in the UK?
Um, so there's a lot of questions there.
Yeah.
Firstly, I think we're the only podcast in the world that is powering NordVPN and not sponsored by it or not got some kind of hookup. I use Jared Kimber's code. I think it's Kimber 40 or something. If you go and look at the good area stuff, you can see all the ways to get money off your NordVPN subscription on that. And thank God for Nord, because they do allow you to make your laptop look like it or feel like it's in Colombo, so that you can watch what's going on in Sri Lanka. I don't think we can blame Sri Lanka cricket for this, because I think Asian Cricket
Mm-hmm.
Council is the organisation that's involved with selling the rights for this particular tournament, and I think they have been unsuccessful in getting it away. Last time round, when Sri Lanka got to the final in Bangladesh, I was able to watch most of this on YouTube streams. I can't remember whether it was the ACC YouTube channel or what YouTube channel it was on, but I did watch it on that, and hopefully, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, it'll be quite easy to get a hold of, and I can give my VPN a bit of a break for the next couple of weeks. That's a lie, because LPL's going on, so I need to exercise it for that. But yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. This is my feeling, and it's not necessarily directed at anyone in ACC or in general. In fact, it's directed at a very different group of people. In the UK, from my perspective, there was a massive push to see women's sport on television and increased professionalisation of women's sport. However, I do very much feel when it comes to cricket, that conversation is still largely around the big three and possibly South Africa thrown into it. I think everyone else is kind of left by the wayside. I know I say this, you know, knowing that Pakistan and New Zealand have both come to England to play women's games in the in the very recent past, but I don't think the populace, the mass, kind of the body fans of around the sport have much consideration for kind of the smaller cricketing nations, and I think it's really tragic, because you can see the mistakes and the issues that it's caused in the men's game and the way Test cricket's gone for men's cricket, and you kind of feel like history's been allowed to repeat itself with the women's game. It's interesting for me how, you know, we're going to talk about the other teams at this tournament. We're going to talk about Malaysia. We're going to talk about Thailand, and that they're like reasonably developed cricketing teams in terms of women's cricket, and their women's teams are further along than the men's teams are. And, you know, this would be a good point of which, you know, the big three and the large cricketing nations kind of step in and kind of help them out a little bit more and gave them a few more fixtures and got them more exposure. And, you know, part of that would be to find space on one of the millions of channels that we have in this country to broadcast this tournament. But the reality is there doesn't appear to be an appetite from a broadcaster to do it. And, you know, that's the world I live in.
All right. Well, that sad news aside, Sri Lanka is bringing a strong squad into this tournament. They've played really well recently, as we all know. And we talked about this a couple episodes ago, but I'll read the full squad just to remind everybody who's there. We've got Chamri Atapattu captaining. We've got Vishmi Gunaratna, Harsitha Samaravikrama, Hassani Pereira, Kavisha Dilhari, Nilakshi De Silva, Anushka Sanjeevani, Sugandhika Kumari, Udeshika Prabodhini, Achini Kulasurya, Inoshi Priyadarshini, Kavya Kavindi, Sachini Nisansala, Sashini Gimhani, and Amma Kachana. Okay, so we've got a 15-member squad. I think a couple of things to me that stand out is that there's a ton of spin bowlers in this attack, but they're backing some of the players that they rested in the latest West Indies T20 series that we covered a few weeks back. So, Estelle, looking at this squad, what do you think the strengths of it are, and what do you think the weaknesses are?
I think the main strength for Sri Lanka, after a long time, I have to say, is the batting, because they seem to have found those support options, right? I mean, over the last, probably Chamari's entire career, the only point where she's had some support is when she had Shashikala Sirivardhana in the team. But apart from that, she's been basically bearing the weight of the entire batting unit on her shoulders. But as we've seen over the last couple of years, there have been little by little players are beginning to step up. And I've spoken about this before on this pod and different other pods as well, about how sometimes the lack of depth has turned, I mean, in this case, has turned out to be a blessing in disguise, because it's meant that the same players have got lots of opportunities to keep playing international cricket. And it's kind of beginning to grow, like show some dividends now. So I think the batting is probably the stronger suit for Sri Lanka, and most certainly chasing it is. I'm currently writing a preview of Sri Lanka's team for the newsletter. So if you haven't subscribed, you can go and subscribe. We have content coming on all the time from Dominic as well. So in that, when I was just going through the research, right, of Sri Lanka's top 7 batters over the last 2 years, 6 of them have a strike rate above 100. And I mean, people will hear that and say that's a low bar. Okay, you're supposed to be scoring at faster than a run a ball. But that was never the case maybe 3 years ago, right? You had maybe Chamari scoring at faster than a run a ball, but everybody else was sometimes even in the 70s, right? So you've seen all of them. That is Vishmi Gunaratna, Harshita Samaravikram. Harshita is actually the only one who is not scoring at above a run a ball. Anushka Sanjeevani, Hasini Pereira, Nilakshi, Kavisha, all of them are scoring at faster than a run a ball. So that definitely is the reason Sri Lanka have seen a lot of success over the last couple of years. In terms of weaknesses, I think I know with the men's side, we have a problem with people being over reliant on experience. But I am still skeptical about them leaving out the likes of Inoka Ranavira, because I feel like maybe 12 months ago, she was still your your best spinner, right? Um, so I'm a bit skeptical about why they have left her out. But I guess in this series we will see whether the others who've been picked instead of her will be able to step up. I do think that in that sense, the bowling lacks a bit of experience as well as I mean, taking her away means you're taking away a wicket taking option as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it is something we saw even during the World Cup qualifiers where when we were put under pressure, who's going to pick up that wicket? Because Sugandhika Kumar is a defensive option.
Mm.
So is Achini Kulasurya and Udeshika Prabodhini. Kavisha is kind of a wicket taking option, and so is Inoshi. So you kind of you're not quite sure where the wicket is going to come, and that's I mean, wickets are going to be really important. I'm sure we'll get to the conditions later.
Mm.
I think it's going to be very, very batting friendly, so wickets are going to be really important. So I think that might be Sri Lanka's weakness, but of course we've seen Sri Lanka's batting even um, in the recent past. When put under pressure, it could go either way.
Mm.
But overall, I think if I had to decide between the two, I would say the batting is the strength. The bowling, the wicket taking options are where you see there's a bit of a hole.
Mark, I want to come to you. There's a couple of things that I want to circle back to, but I want to start with Estelle saying that the batting is the strength of the team. And Mark, when you first started following Sri Lanka women's cricket closely several years back, could you imagine saying something like that? And what do you think is the driver of that change where now we back our top six or top seven to put runs on the board for our bowlers to defend?
Look, there's definitely lessons here for other Sri Lankan national sides, because all the mistakes we see being made in the men's team just haven't happened for the women's team. Right? We've had a they've had a fairly consistent coaching setup now for the last kind of three years, maybe a little bit longer. Can't quite remember when people have started to be put into place. They've had fairly consistent team selection as well. Players are allowed to make mistakes. We've seen that with Vishmi and with Harshita, where they've come in and we've seen the benefit of them being backed and being, I don't know if they're told as bluntly, but they're kind of told that if you get out for a duck, you're not going to be dropped. Some cynics will say that's because there's no one else to pick. I kind of don't think that's really true anymore. I think we know that there is a pool of talent there and that they've worked hard to develop that pool of talent. But it's just consistency and instilling confidence into players. And also, I think there's role clarity as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
I also think you can't underestimate having a taliswoman like Charmery in that side and what she brings to it, because it's that galvanizing effect, right? When it used to be a case, 3 or 4 seasons ago, where if she didn't perform, if she got out early, it was likely to be a total collapse. And slowly over, the last kind of 18 months or so, we've seen the others are slowly starting to come to the party. And I think, she's pushing the players to be a little bit more. I mean, you can kind of compare it to someone like LeBron or Ronaldo, or in terms of she's getting a lot more out of these players, because I assume she probably inspires them, right? But also it's me and Estelle I think longer than me. We've been following these girls on this journey, and a lot of them now, I've been kind of watching them since they were in their late teens. And you can see them, and even on their social media, on their Instagram, they're becoming more and more professional. They're embracing what it is to be a professional cricketer. They get paid more than they were a year ago. They get more opportunities than they've had a year ago. They're being allowed to indulge themselves into it. I think they're allowing their brains to kind of go into, what it is to be a professional. So I think we're reaping the benefits of all of that.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that persistent selection is so important. If you looked at Vishmi Gunaratne's stats, 6 months, 9 months ago, you would see someone who was averaging 10 or 11, striking at 90, and you'd think, okay, is it time to move on? But they saw her skill set, and they saw that her skill set was one that was able to score runs and would be able to score runs, and now they're reaping hugely from those benefits. And trusting in the skill set, trusting in the quality of the players is huge. And now, not only are they reaping the benefits of having those players pay off, now they're starting to get replacements who are of solid quality as well. I'm really excited to see Kavisha take the next step as a batter. I'm really excited to see that and see whether she can kind of become that dominant presence down the order to power the lineup.
Yeah, I think we've got to keep her. We've got to bear in mind that we are on the kind of farewell tour for Charmery a little bit, right? She's not going to be around forever. I'm not expecting her to retire after the Asia Cup, but I think after the World Cup, there is a risk that she might call it a day. Then it's not the worst time for her to leave this side. It looks like there's more opportunities opening up for her in franchise cricket as well. And I think she's, at this stage in her career and in her life, she's within her rights to go off and try and exploit that as much as possible. And she's kind of leaving the team in a good place. And it kind of does feel that there is players coming in who can, can kind of step up. But we really want to see now that kind of really serious acceleration for the players, so that we get that kind of consistency, which we're starting to kind of, it feels like we are starting to get it, but we need to start thinking of a world post Charmery, right?
Yep. And I think Charmery has been thinking of that, which I think is so important. Her success could be, sort of self-absorbed success, but she cares about the team. After that ODI victory against West Indies, she took a picture with all the young girls who had won Player of the Match and Player of the Series, and posted that she was so proud that she could leave the team in this particular place. And that's incredible. And my hope, and this is echoing something you said, Mark, is I hope that it leads to more deals for these girls in various leagues throughout the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that for it's an absolute shame, and it became an absolute obsession for a lot of Sri Lanka cricket fans how long it took Charmery to get the big deals in the WPL, and I know Charmery played in the Big Bash for quite a while. She's done it a few times to get back to the Big Bash, and then to get to the 100, it's taken a while. And really, for someone like Rishmi or Harshita to really get to the top, they really need to get to those franchise contracts as soon as possible. Basically, that's where they're going to develop. I'm not saying that SLC can't take them really far. They absolutely can, but they need to just constantly be in those elite environments as much as possible to learn, as I say, to learn what it is to be a professional, to develop good habits, to work with different coaches, to learn new techniques, to just learn new cultures and play in as many different settings and places as possible to kind of develop their batting. I think we're having a few issues with Estelle's connection. Maybe Estelle's preparing us for the post-Estelle world when she goes off and gets the big bucks somewhere else. Yeah.
So, Mark, I want to turn, right? So Estelle is back. Perfect. I was going to turn the question to us that I was going to send to you to Mark, but we talked about the bowling, right? And the bowling being a potential weakness, Estelle. And I'm curious about what bowling combination you think they're going to go with. I think one thing that I notice, at least about the squad, is there's tons of spin options, at least 6 or 7 of them. How do you think they'll sort that for individual games? Do you think they'll keep a consistent lineup, or do you think they'll chop and change maybe to get some of the younger players in?
I think there's a definite chance that we see Shashini Gimhani in this tournament. Sri Lanka facing Malaysia and Thailand in the first round. And Atapattu did hint at the fact that they want to see what she has to offer, because there are still a couple of positions in the squad that are up in the air for the World Cup, right? So they want to see what she has to offer. The other one is obviously Sachini Sansara, who did well against the West Indies. I think for Bangladesh, they'll probably go full strength. So they'll have the 2 quicks. They'll have Udeshika Prabodhini, and they'll have Inoshi Fernando as well. And then they'll have to decide whether they want a third spinner, or whether they want to play Ama Kanchana, because you've got Atapattu and Kavisha, who will also be most likely bowling at least 3 to 4, at least 3 overs, right? I think that will be the combination for the first game, but I do think that particularly if Sri Lanka win against Bangladesh, then they will be tempted to try out a couple of options in the second and third game.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting questions is, we just talked about the foresight that this team has had, right? The ability to think forward, and it's kind of one of those questions of, do you want to see what you have in some of these bowlers who might be game changers, someone like Gimhani or Nissan Salah, or do you want to have the players that are going to be playing in that World Cup in Bangladesh playing as many matches as possible, playing together, getting into their roles? So that's always a tough decision. Mark, do you have any thoughts about unleashing the potential X factor, or having a team that is consistent and solid and going into the World Cup playing with what they believe is their best 11 and being consistent with it?
So I think in the kind of road to the road, I can't remember where the final is. I was going to say the road to Dhaka, but I don't think it is in Dhaka, is it? Is it the road to the
It is,
World
it
Cup
is.
final? Is all right. So the road to Dhaka, I think, is the road map at least is kind of laid out, right? So they've got the Asia Cup, but they're coming to Ireland to play some games, and I assume there'll be some warm ups ahead of Bangladesh, which means like actually there's a fair bit of cricket for them to play between now and then. I think now though, by the time they get to the end of the Asia Cup, be that the semi-finals or the final, they need to know what their strongest 11 is, and I think they need to start thinking about having them on the pitch together as much as possible. The conditions are going to be quite similar or as similar as that we can get to what it's going to be like in Bangladesh. When they come to Ireland, those Irish pitches are not going to behave anything like Asian pitches, right? I think that might be the place where you kind of experiment a little bit. I've heard some talk online about, could Shamri sit it out? Will she start those games? I mean, 100% she's going to be with the squad, right? That if you know what Sri Lankan cricket means to them playing for a national side, you know that she'll be there with them. I think possibly that might be the place that they look to go. Is this the time when we try and get a win without Sharma in the team? Because it's been a very long time since that's happened in Sri Lanka. I think the Asia Cup, it's at home, it's a way out with the performances and getting ready for the World Cup to build momentum for this team in Sri Lanka as well, right? To get the public really excited. If they go out and get to the final like they did last time around, if they can get a big win somewhere along the line against the Blue Dragon across the river, then that will really get this country excited and get us all excited about what this team can achieve, right? And I don't think we're that far away from it, right? This is a united group of players. They all seem to love playing for each other. There's so much unique talent in there. It's a very Sri Lankan team in terms of unique batting approaches, unique bowling approaches. I think the coaches have to sit down and be like, right, what is our team? What is our 12 or 13 players we think can get us all the way the end of that road to Dhaka? And how are we doing it? This is their chance to kind of bring them all together, get that top team out, and bring the country along on the journey.
Yeah, and I wonder too if that's I agree with being played at home has a huge role. You want to put on the best show that you can for the home fans who are excited. The other thing is practicing strategies that you think you might need against some of those top teams, even if it's not necessary, right? You could get away with other ways. Practicing those strategies or the bowling plans or the batting plans that you're going to need when you face Australia, when you face India is really important, right? Because we're in a very tough group for the World Cup. So I think we're going to have to go in fully prepared, and we're going to have to go in prepared in a way like game prepared, right? You can't just say, okay, theoretically we know what we have to do, but we want to have practiced it and nailed it down as much as possible. That brings us to the issue Estelle kind of alluded to, what the pitches are going to be like in Dambulla. You're on the ground, Estelle. How do they look? they seem, if we're going to base it off of the recent LPL, they're going to be batting friendly. But do you think they're more pace or spin friendly at this point?
Yeah, I'm not an expert on reading pitches, but what I can tell from what we've seen in the recent past is that Dambulla has been very batting friendly, right? Even if we look past the LPL, uh,
Yeah.
they hosted a few games with Afghanistan earlier this year, and that also produced some high scoring games. I mean, I was looking at the scores from the LPL, I think 9 matches, only 2 games produced scores less than 180. Everything else was 180 plus 230 was chased down. So I would expect it to be a high scoring tournament. But at the same time, the fact that it was used for the LPL for 9 games means that there might be a bit of wear and tear on the tracks as well. So that could have an effect. Either way, I think like the ground conditions are going to be perfect. The outfield's going to be really quick. But I mean, I don't think it'll be similar to what we will see in Bangladesh, because what I'm hearing from them is that in Dhaka and Sylhet, it is still very much spin friendly, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but Dambulla I don't think has ever been that spin friendly. But it's just that in the last or from the beginning of this year, what we've seen is that it's been very high scoring as well.
Yeah.
So it should be interesting because, in my opinion, I think a lot of the lower ranked teams, or the gap between lower ranked teams and top teams, are diminished when it's bowling friendly, right?
Yeah.
So batting friendly would make it tougher for, like, I mean, India's coming into this series after like a superb run of games. So it will be tough to keep up with a team like India, who are very, very good with the
Mm.
bat. They're powerful players as well. So it'll be interesting to see. I think maybe later on in the tournament we might see a lot more spin coming into play.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree 100%. We saw that in the recently completed men's World Cup, where lower scoring pitches that favor bowling, definitely increase the chances of upsets.
Yeah.
And it's always hard to plan for that, though. You do want good pitches where batters are going to feel free to score runs, and I think the public will enjoy that. But you'll have it in the back of your mind that maybe there are going to be some slow, low pitches, but I think the Sri Lankan women have the capability of dealing with those. So that brings us to kind of a more kind of big picture question. Mark, what do you think is the importance of this tournament in particular for Sri Lanka, right? Because we've been talking about the World Cup, right? And that's the ultimate goal. Where does doing well in the Asia Cup fit in the sort of trajectory of this team to succeeding in the World Cup in a few months? Do you view it as a crucial stepping stone, or is it kind of a training ground where you just kind of want to get everything perfect for Bangladesh?
I think it's all of the above, right? Winning is winning, and winning is
Mhm.
habitual, right? When you get used to winning, you you find not winning very difficult, and you also find ways to keep winning as well. I think that's the most important thing here is they've got to win, and they've got to consistently win because it's a tournament. I think I brought up that it's in Sri Lanka. That's massively important. I think we've talked a lot about having a Sri Lankan LPL. This is the first women's tournament they've had in Sri Lanka for a little while. If they can build some real momentum here and get the whole island behind them and get people talking about it, and really start to bring crowds out in Dambulla, then that would be amazing. I know that it's free entry, right? So into the stadium, so that's going to help for one. And I think it's about building that winning momentum. It's about building the momentum in the country and among the fans for the team. It's also even if they just win, if there's a scenario where they win the Asia Cup and they crash out in the group stages of the World Cup, right, which is a totally possible thing to happen because they've got a tough group when they get to Bangladesh, then at least this team, and we've seen this with men's teams in the recent past, can say Asia Cup winners, Asia Cup champions. This is the best white ball team. Well, which kind of basically means this is the best women's team Sri Lanka have ever had at cricket. we've seen over a few years this team develop. They'll be thinking a lot of this squad were at the Asia Cup final a couple of years ago in Bangladesh. They'll be thinking we know we can get back to that final. How do we do one better than we did last time? Those will be the questions being asked in the camp tonight and tomorrow in the next kind of few days. And those girls will be hungry for the win. That like it will mean a lot to them to win it, and it'll have a galvanizing effect. Remember what it was like when the men won it a couple of years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly, I'm arguing with anyone who'll listen that I think Sri Lanka were dark horses. They were dark horses for crashing out, and they did. But we watch sport to see teams win trophies, right? Mm-hmm. This is a trophy. Go and win it.
Estelle, do you think it has to be a win in order to be a successful tournament?
I think, if they can beat India, it would be massive, because just looking at how the women's game is going right now, it looks like India and England are probably favorites for the World Cup later this year. So that would definitely be a boost. Since they were runners-up last time as well, right? So I don't know if they will be satisfied with a runner-up position once again. Just to get back to your question on like the importance, I think it's like Mark mentioned, it's also critically important for. It's unfortunate that women have to keep doing this, where they have to prove that they're worth the investment and worth the support and all of that. But with free entry, and some of the top teams of the area in Sri Lanka, I think it's also a massive opportunity to reach new audiences, and show that there is interest in the women's game. I mean, early today, I met someone who coached me at Coles Cricket Club, right? And she was talking about how she's coaching at SSC right now, Randika Galhenage. She was talking about how now kids who come in to play club level are no longer leaving at the age of 20 to go and join the forces. They're staying in those clubs because they're getting paid now. And that is sure to like increase, because I mean, whatever said and done, right, you're going to have I would have been reluctant to join the forces, even if it was to play cricket, right? So I'm sure there are a lot of sheltered kids like me who would be a bit reluctant to go down that path. So now with more opportunities coming in, that opens the doors for a lot more kids to get into the sport. And then when they have a tournament like this, and if Sri Lanka can do well, that would only increase that interest further, right? Because now they have genuine pathways to get into the national side. So I think it's massively important. It could be one of the turning points for Sri Lanka in the women's game.
And I'm remembering, in our youth, we watched Aravinda de Silva, Sanath Jayasuriya, Murali, and we all wanted to be like them. This is the chance for the girls or the women who have already won my heart, to win even more hearts throughout the island, and to make them sort of people to follow, people to emulate, people to want to be like. And Estelle, what you're saying is really fascinating, to see how the game is changing in these subtle ways, and the potential impact that the success of the women's cricket team could have on the way that cricket is viewed on the island. I think it means something huge that Chamari was the one picked to open the LPL. She is kind of at this moment the face of Sri Lanka cricket, men's or women's. And I'd also love to see if the men's team would go out and support the women. I think are they playing in Pallekele? Yeah, they're playing in Pallekele.
Yeah.
So maybe a bit far away, but it would be really nice to see them come out and show their support and profess that support publicly, because in terms of national pride and doing Sri Lanka proud, the women have been brilliant. Okay, so we're going to wrap this up, not before long, but I want to ask for predictions. We're going to ask one for prediction on Sri Lanka's finish, And who sort of your pick for a huge performance that's not Chamari Atapatu in this tournament? All right, so I'll start with you, Mark. What is your prediction?
I reckon they're gonna get to the final, and I think they've got one big final win in them this year. And I think it's coming a little bit later on in the year. This is a bit too early for them.
And your prediction for standout player, not named Chamari?
There's a lot. There's quite a few of them, right? It's going to be one of the bowlers, though, isn't it? I think, because I think the runs, we might see that kind of shared out. Maybe I'm going to go Kavisha Dilhari. I think, because I don't know. To me, she they're all really good. I'm picking one out of the dark. Basically, I'm not gonna justify it or anything. Just name out of the hat. It could be any of them.
Estelle.
Okay, so my prediction, like Mark, I think anything other than the final would be a massive disappointment. I think at this point, the way the team has played over the last couple of years, anything other than the final would be a disappointment. I think their only realistic chance of beating India is if they chase. I don't think they're setting a total and defending it against that Indian lineup. So there is a chance. I mean, the only realistic chance is if they chase. Otherwise, I mean, I want to be optimistic, but I think it's a bit stretching it a bit if we think we go into that picture as favorites. I mean, India might not even make the final. Who knows, right? In terms of standout player, I think it's going to be Vishmi Gunaratne. I think she's had a superb couple of series, and we've spoken about this a lot of the times when we've discussed her. We've spoken about how was it too early to push her into the national side? Should she have, got some time at the junior level and, slowly, gradually been brought in? But it seems like during the last two series, she has proven their faith, right? The way she's gone about things. She is occasionally a slow starter, but I think when she does get going early, that takes a lot of pressure off Atapattu as well, because Atapattu is sometimes caught between, particularly when we bat first, she's caught between, do I need to bat 15, 16, 17 overs, or do I want to go hard right at the top? So when Vishmi gets off to a good start, then that takes all that pressure off Atapattu, and she's done that in the most recent series. I'm just looking at her numbers. Her career numbers, she has an average of she's made 597 runs, average of 20, and strike rate of 91, right? 250s. That is overall. And during the last year, she has, of the 597, she has 375 runs. Her average has gone up by 11 points, and her strike rate by 10. And both her 50s have come in the last 12 months, right? So there's been a massive growth there. The form is there. I think everything is in here. The mentality she's bringing in is a good one. So I think she's. If I was to pick someone other than Atapattu, I think it'll be Vishmi. I hope I haven't put the knockers on her or anything, but I think it's going to be her.
All right. Well, I'm going to pick a final appearance, but a loss to India. But I will view it as a learning loss. I think they're going to run them close, and I think they're going to learn from that and pick up some plans for how to beat them later on. I was going to pick Kavisha Dilhari as my standout superstar. I think the energy she injects into the game whenever she shows up to bat, whenever she's bowling, is just incredible. And Vishmi was, again, my second, but I'll just throw out one more name, and one name that maybe doesn't come to everyone's mind. I think Anushka Sanjeevani might be in for a big tournament. She was playing really, really well. I think, Estelle, you noted that the last knock she played against West Indies was basically the best knock of her career.
Yeah.
She's got power down the order, and if it's a batting friendly wicket, I think we might see some big runs out of her. So that's my kind of dark horse pick. But if you ask me who my number one, it would be Kavisha Dilhari. All right, shall we wrap it up there? If you've been listening for all 40 minutes of this, give us a like, give us a subscribe to the newsletter so you can read Estelle's brilliant piece on the women's team and their Asia Cup preview. And if you're listening on a pod, give us a follow and write us a review. Thank you for listening. This has been the Morley End. Bye.